ways to find out what your customer's experience was like when they use your service is to be a mystery customer yourself and see things through your customer's eyes. Act as one of a group of customers with special needs, such as a person in a wheelchair or someone whose first language is not English, and see how you are treated. It can be an interesting experience.
2.
There can be a great difference between what we think people want and what people really want. For example, when hotel customers are asked what they want for their breakfast, and then the waiting and catering staff are asked what they think the customer wants, the answers are very often different. The easiest way to find out whether or not a customer was satisfied with the service provided is to ask them directly. That's what a waiter does when he asks, "Did you enjoy your meal?"
3. Getting customers to fill in a questionnaire is one of the most well-established feedback techniques. This can be by post, email, or telephone. Hire phone survey experts to call your customers, but make sure they are polite and unaggressive, because many people react negatively to unsolicited phone calls. You could also design attractive postcards with a few questions for your customers to answer. Keep these short and easy to complete. The information should be stored in a database and statistics produced to give quantitative information on how well you are performing.
4.
Create a feedback area on your website where customers can answer questions when it's convenient for them. If the questionnaire is long, remember to allow people to save their data and come back to it later.
5. Focus groups, small groups of customers who give intensive feedback about specific topics, are one of the best ways I know to find out how we are performing. Form a focus group with some of your regular customers. You can obtain good qualitative data and, at the same time, make customers feel part of the organization. I also think it's important to always give customers who participate in a focus group some kind of reward.
6. Your frontline staff are the most knowledgeable as well as the least expensive of your sources of customer feedback. Frontline staff should be encouraged to build strong relationships with customers so that the customers feel free to share how they really feel about the service. Managers should then ask frontline staff to pass on important information on how to improve customer care. However, don't forget that it is important to use the information you obtain in this way and act upon it. If you don't, staff will quickly feel demotivated and stop giving you feedback.
Hi, can I speak to Alain Fournier, please?
Hello, this is Alain Fournier speaking.
Hi, it's Bethany Martinez. I sent you an email yesterday about a group we have who would like to do a tour of France next fall. I was wondering if you've had the chance to give us a costing.
Yes, well, I've been looking into the entrance fees and prices of some of the places that the group could possibly visit, and I've been drawing up a table to see how the prices compare.
Okay, sounds good.
We haven't yet worked out an itinerary. There are several possible alternatives. I think that most people who come to France want to go to Versailles, and I've got a price there of $25 with an audio commentary, so there's no language problem. I guess they don't speak French.
No, probably not.
I can get a museum pass for the Loire Valley Chateau for $65, That includes entrance fees to 10 chateaux, but I doubt if they'd want to visit them all.
No, but that sounds pretty good value.
And then there's the Mont Saint-Michel, which is incredibly popular, a bit crowded in the summer with about 2.5 million visitors every year, but I've negotiated a group ticket for $9.90 a head. I'm quoting in dollars, obviously. I've also got a good deal from the Pope's Palace in Avignon at $125, whatever the size of the group, and an English-speaking guide thrown in.
These prices are firm and definite, are they?
They're what we pay. Obviously, we'll be giving you an itinerary and a global price that takes all these charges into account. And we don't have to charge anything for accommodation, as all the hotels we use belong to the group, so accommodation is factored into the price.
Good. That should keep the price down for us. What other places would be possible?
Well, as they're interested in gastronomy, I think a tour of vineyards in Burgundy and the medieval hospital in Beaune would be worthwhile. And I've been on the phone to a vineyard owner in Bordeaux who can do me a tour and gastronomic dinner for just $110 a head. But there are other places as well that should interest the group. For example, the Normandy beaches and the War Museum in Caen, which is actually free, so we'll probably suggest that. Anyway, what I'll do is get my team working on a detailed itinerary and give you a price per person for the tour.
Okay. Do you think you could do that for today?
We'll do our best. I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, same to you. Bye.
Unit 4, page 39. Exercises 3 and 4.
So, is El Dorado a safe place for tourists?
There was a time when our country was dangerous. But the Civil War was over 5 years ago, and it's very different now. In fact, because of our low crime rate, our country is now considered entirely safe. Last year, over 60,000 visitors came here from the USA, and tourism is growing really fast. We've already generated $99 million in revenue from tourism in the first 4 months of this year.
How many visitors do you expect this year?
More than 1 million, mainly from the USA. But there are more and more visitors from other parts of the world. Tourism investment is up by 11.8% this year, and we expect our tourism receipts to rise by more than 16%.
The TV reality program Lost and Found, which has a big audience in the United States, was filmed here recently. Has this had any effect on tourism?
It was a really great public relations exercise. The program will be on for 14 weeks every Wednesday night during TV prime time and will be watched by 13 million American households. That's a massive audience who have probably never considered our country as a tourism destination. But most important is the positive image of the country that the program portrays.
What plans do you have to develop tourism in El Dorado?
Well, we want to increase the amount of hotel accommodation available. At the moment, we have 7,800 hotel rooms, which isn't enough. Our neighboring countries offer around 38,000. We're working with 2 Spanish hotel chains, Sun Sol Hotels and Ambrosi Resorts, to improve what we have to offer. Our government is offering tax exemptions of almost 100% during the first 10 years of foreign companies that set up here. If within the next 10 years they decide to reinvest 35% of the initial amount, the exemption can be extended.
Okay, so that's bound to attract investors. Thank you very much for talking to me.
China's economy is picking up as the country continues to dig its way out of the turmoil caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The world's second-largest economy expanded 4.9% in the July to September quarter compared to a year ago, according to government statistics released Monday. The pace was quicker than the 3.2% increase that China recorded in the second quarter when it managed to avoid the pandemic-fueled recession that has gripped much of the globe. But the growth was also a bit weaker than expected. Analysts polled by Refinitiv predicted that China's economy would expand 5.2%. China's economy continued its rapid rebound last quarter, with the recovery broadening out and becoming less reliant on investment-led stimulus, wrote Julian Evans-Pritchard, senior China economist for Capital Economics, in a research note. As much of the world continues to struggle with the virus, China's recovery has been relatively speedy. The country enforced stringent lockdown and population tracking policies intended to contain the virus and set aside hundreds of billions of dollars for major infrastructure projects to fuel economic growth. The economy grew a cumulative 0.7% through the first 9 months of this year. What's more, the monthly data show that growth was still accelerating heading into Q4, Evans-Pritchard added. Industrial production grew 5.8% in the third quarter from a year ago, according to Lu Aihua, a spokeswoman for China's National Bureau of Statistics. That's faster than the second quarter's 4.4% uptick. The service sector also expanded at a faster pace, up 4.3% this quarter compared with 1.9% in the April to June period. The service sector had been lagging behind other industries earlier this year as partial lockdowns and social distancing policies remained in place, noted Chaiping Zhu, global market strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management. But the more recent recovery signals a more broad-based growth in the economy, he added. Retail sales are also improving, up 0.9% in the third quarter from a year ago, with a 3.3% gain in September alone. And the unemployment rate is dropping, 5.4% in September, compared to 5.6% in August. So far we can say consumption has already climbed out from the pandemic's deep shock, Lu said at a press conference in Beijing. The recovery is underway. She added that more people are willing to come out from their homes and spend money in the physical shops as the pandemic has been brought under control. Asian markets were fairly muted in Monday trade. China's Shanghai Composite, SHCOM, rose slightly before the GDP announcement but reversed gains to trade about 0.3% lower. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index, HSI, gained 0.7% positive but slightly lower than earlier in the morning. Japan's Nikkei, N225, rose 1.1% and South Korea's Kospi, added 0.7%.
Former Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister and PDP President Mahbooba Mufti, who was released from detention after over a year, said that she would continue her struggle for the restoration of Article 370 and the resolution of the Kashmir issue. She termed the centre's decision of August 5 as a daylight robbery. We all have to pledge that we will take back what was snatched illegally, undemocratically and unconstitutionally on August 5 last year. We will also have to work for the resolution of Kashmir issue, for which thousands of people have laid down their lives, Mahbooba said in an 83-second audio message on Twitter late on Tuesday night. Addressing after 14 months, the PDP leader said it will not be an easy task as there will be difficulties in this path, but our steadfastness and determination will be our aids in this struggle. On August 5 last year, the centre had ended the special status of Jammu and Kashmir and bifurcated it into union territories on August 5. Mahbooba also demanded the release of Kashmiri people languishing in various jails. As I have been released, all other persons from Kashmir who were detained in various jails across the country should also be released, she said. Mahbooba was released on Tuesday night after the Union Territory Administration revoked the Public Safety Act charges against her more than a year after she was detained following the abrogation of the special status of Jammu and Kashmir. The development came barely 2 days before the Supreme Court was to hear the matter related to her detention. Mahbooba, 60, who was initially put under preventive custody on August 5 last year and later booked under the stringent PSA on February 6, was shifted to her official residence on April 7 after it was declared a subsidiary jail by the authorities.
For more than 3 years, federal prosecutors investigated whether money flowing through an Egyptian state-owned bank could have backed millions of dollars Donald Trump donated to his own campaign days before he won the 2016 election. Multiple sources familiar with the investigation told CNN. The investigation, which both predated and outlasted Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe, examined whether there was an illegal foreign campaign contribution. It represents one of the most prolonged efforts by federal investigators to understand the president's foreign financial ties and became a significant but hidden part of the special counsel's pursuits. The investigation was kept so secret that at one point investigators locked down an entire floor of a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. so Mueller's team could fight for the Egyptian bank's records in closed-door court proceedings following a grand jury subpoena. The probe, which closed this summer with no charges filed, has never before been described publicly. Prosecutors suspected there could be a link between the Egyptian bank and Trump's campaign contribution according to several of the sources, but they could never prove a connection. It's not clear that investigators ever had concrete evidence of a relevant bank transfer from the Egyptian bank. But multiple sources said there was sufficient information to justify the subpoena and keep the criminal campaign finance investigation open after the Mueller probe ended. CNN learned of the Egypt investigation from more than a dozen sources familiar with the effort, as well as through hints in public records including newly released court documents and Mueller witness interview summaries called 302s that CNN and BuzzFeed obtained through lawsuits. In a court filing last month, the Justice Department confirmed that when the special counsel's office shut down in 2019, Mueller transferred an ongoing foreign campaign contribution investigation to prosecutors in Washington. Some of CNN's sources have confirmed that the case, which Mueller cryptically called a foreign campaign contribution probe, was in fact the Egypt investigation. The probe was confirmed this week by a Justice Department senior official who responded to CNN's queries. The case was first looked at by the special counsel investigators who failed to bring a case, and then it was looked at by the U.S. Attorney's Office and career prosecutors in the National Security Section who also were unable to bring a case. Based upon the recommendations of both the FBI and those career prosecutors, Michael Sherwin, the acting U.S. Attorney, formally closed the case in July. Top U.S. envoy on Monday, October 12, called China an elephant in the room and said Washington is keen to advance India's interests across the Indo-Pacific region. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun said the U.S. was exploring ways to empower India without altering what he called New Delhi's strong and proud tradition of strategic autonomy. Biegun spoke in New Delhi at the opening session of the India-US Forum after his 3-day visit to India kicked off on Monday. India has a strong and proud tradition of strategic autonomy, and we respect that. We do not seek to change India's traditions, he said. Rather, we want to explore how to empower them and India's ability to defend its own sovereignty and democracy and to advance Indian interests across the Indo-Pacific region. In that direction, Washington has increased its foreign military sales and intelligence sharing with India, the number 2 U.S. diplomat said. But there is more that we can do, including strengthening India's ability to defend itself and by promoting interoperability among our militaries, he said. Biegun cautioned about rising China in the region. Of course, as we advance in this direction, there is an elephant in the room, China, he said. His visit follows a meeting last week between U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his counterparts of India, Japan and Australia in Tokyo, who together make up the 4 Indo-Pacific nations known as the Quad. The group of the 4 nations is seen as a counterweight to China, who experts say is flexing its military muscle in the South China Sea, East China Sea, Taiwan Straits and along its northern border with India. Pompeo had said China's increasingly assertive actions across the region make it more critical than ever for the Quad to cooperate and protect their partners and people from Chinese exploitation, corruption and coercion. Biegun's New Delhi visit also comes amid a recent flurry in military tensions between China and India over the disputed mountainous border in the Ladakh region. Washington has also increasingly criticized Beijing over the coronavirus, trade, technology, Hong Kong, Taiwan and human rights. China has denied allegations of covering up the pandemic, saying it acted quickly to provide information to the World Health Organization and the world. It says the U.S. is the biggest aggressor in the South China Sea. Beijing also denies human rights violations in its handling of Hong Kong and Ahmadiyya Muslims in the Xinjiang region. It accuses Western nations of meddling in its internal affairs. Biegun said that the partnership between the 4 Quad countries is driven by shared interests, not binding obligations, and is not intended to be an exclusive grouping. Any country that seeks a free and open Indo-Pacific and is willing to take steps to ensure that should be welcome to work with us, said Biegun. Biegun is expected to lay the groundwork for the 2+2 dialogue during his visit to India between Pompeo and U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper and their Indian counterparts, External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh later this month. Biegun's remarks about respecting India's strategic autonomy were seen as placating India's concerns about forging direct strategic alliances in an attempt not to upset rising China. India is the only country among the Quad nations that shares borders with Beijing. Boris Johnson and his top 2 scientific advisors tonight wheeled out a set of striking statistics laying bare Britain's COVID-19 divide between the North and the South, as the Prime Minister warned of a second, more costly lockdown unless the outbreak tails off. In a rallying cry urging Britons to keep fighting the disease to protect the NHS and save lives, Mr. Johnson insisted the country knows how to drive down the virus because we did it before. And in warning the UK had reached a critical moment, he vowed not to throw in the sponge and pledged to bring in tougher measures if needed. And in a defiant message to Tory hawks desperate to reopen the economy faster, the PM insisted that letting the virus take its course in a Sweden-style approach risked overwhelming the NHS and causing thousands more deaths. He also warned it was too early to judge whether the rule of 6 and 10 p.m. curfew were working. Top experts have repeatedly warned that Britain needs to learn to live with COVID-19 because it will be with us for generations. Businesses fear tougher measures similar to ones imposed in the first draconian lockdown would cripple the economy even further. Mr. Johnson addressed the nation alongside Professor Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance despite coming under intense pressure. Scientists from such briefings amid complaints they are being used as propaganda to back up increasingly draconian restrictions. The trio presented maps that starkly expose the North-South coronavirus divide. And official data shows that the average number of positive tests each day is at least twice as high in northwest England as in any other region, and that Scotland's cases are 14 times higher than they were at the beginning of August, outpacing England's outbreak.
COVID-19 infections clearly started to rise after Super Saturday, according to an analysis of official data that has revealed the number of Britons being diagnosed each day is now 54% higher than it was a week ago as the outbreak continues to grow. Hundreds of thousands flocked to pubs, restaurants and hairdressers after they were finally allowed to reopen on July 4 after months of being closed to help contain the UK's coronavirus crisis. Leading scientists warned it would cause a spike in infections, while others insisted it was time the nation learns to live with the virus. Mail Online's crunching of government statistics shows COVID-19 infections started to rise within days of Brits being given freedom to enjoy the summer without being cooped up at home. Doctors say it can take patients up to 2 weeks to develop a cough or other telltale symptoms of the disease. Department of Health figures reveal the rolling 7-day average of daily cases on July 9 was 556, down 32% on the week before. But the growth rate had dropped from the -39% the previous day, showing that the outbreak wasn't shrinking as quickly. But it was not just a one-off. Statistics show the rate quickly started to spiral upwards, with July 13, 624 being a 6% jump on the previous week, 590. This was the first time the rate was positive, showing the outbreak had grown since the start of May when testing was massively ramped up to help officials get on top of the pandemic. Infections began to dip off in the middle of August, but it is not clear why. They soon started to pick up towards the end of the month and spiraled after the bank holiday and over the start of September, when millions of children went back to school and workers dashed back to the offices. Growth rates plunged around mid-September when Prime Minister Boris Johnson introduced the rule of 6 in a desperate attempt to curb spiraling rates of coronavirus. The average number of daily infections compared to the week hit a high of 84% on September 12 but fell every day until September 19, government statistics show. They have risen for 6 consecutive days since then, Mail Online can reveal. Health chiefs announced another 6,874 cases yesterday, meaning the 7-day rolling average, 5,329, is 54% higher than it was a week ago, 3,466. By contrast, the rate yesterday was 48% higher than it was last Thursday. Some top scientists had insisted there was not a true rise in cases because the test positivity rate, how many cases are found for every swab completed, had not changed wildly, suggesting any spike is down to swabbing capacity being ramped up. However, this appears to no longer be the case, with government data showing around 20 out of every 1,000 1,000 are testing
那也也吧。
positive now, up from the 15 on September 12th. It comes as chief scientific advisors to the government, Professor Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance, terrified the nation by their gloomy prediction that cases may reach 50,000 per day by mid-October if nothing is done. They claimed infections were doubling every week in line with growing outbreaks in Spain and France. But scientists shot down the claims, warning it was based on old data that relied on just a few hundred positive cases. Even Boris Johnson distanced himself from the claims, saying the outbreak could be doubling up to every 20 days. Other figures from NHS Test and Trace also suggest cases had dwindled last week. But the newest statistics, released yesterday, only go up until September 16, meaning any spike in the past week has yet to be confirmed in another government data set. Department of Health figures show the doubling rate of cases is around 2 weeks. Almost 5,000 people are being diagnosed with COVID-19 every day at the moment, up from 2,500 on September 10th. But this is based on lab-confirmed infections, and thousands of patients won't ever develop any symptoms. The Office for National Statistics, ONS, which tracks the size of the outbreak by carrying out thousands of random swab tests, estimates cases have risen 60% in a week to 9,600 a day. While King's College London researchers, who are behind a symptom tracking app, say it has doubled over the same time frame to around 16,000. Matt Hancock yesterday suggested the true number of cases occurring each day was in the region of 10,000. And the Health Secretary pointed out that the spike now is nowhere near levels seen during the darkest days of the crisis in March and April, when 100,000 people were getting infected every 24 hours. Yesterday, a record high daily cases of 6,874 cases were diagnosed, a huge rise compared to last Friday when 4,322 people were diagnosed with the disease. But millions of Brits went undiagnosed during the first wave of the pandemic due to the government's lackluster testing regime, so it is impossible to accurately compare numbers now to those in March and April. Top experts say more than 100,000 people were actually catching the virus every day during the darkest days of the first wave. Now, estimates range between 9,600 ons and even 18,000. The latter estimate was suggested by Dr. Julian Tang, a respiratory disease expert at the University of Leicester, who claimed the actual number of cases occurring each day in England now may be 3 times greater than what official figures show because of how common asymptomatic patients are. Since reporting of cases varies greatly from the start of the pandemic and even now, day to day, it is helpful to look at a wider time span for signs of change in the outbreak. This provides a clearer picture of where the pandemic is accelerating, staying the same, or reducing because it's less affected by daily variations in reporting. Data shows the rolling 7-day average currently stands at 5,329. That means, over the past 7 days, that many people have been diagnosed in the UK every 24 hours, on average. The figure is 54% higher than that recorded last Friday, 3,466, and it has been increasing every day for the past 6 days. Cases have not been shrinking since the end of August, when the 7-day average was in minus figures for 4 days running. And from around April 17th to July 12th, the average consistently fell because of lockdown. Between 9,000 and 16,000 Britons are catching COVID-19 every day. Data shows between 9,000 and 16,000 Britons are getting infected with coronavirus every day, according to researchers monitoring the UK's outbreak. King's College London, KCL, scientists behind the COVID Symptom Tracker mobile app estimate that there were at least 16,310 daily cases of the disease in the last week, more than double the 7,536 estimated last week. The Office for National Statistics, a government-run agency, has made a more modest estimate yesterday, saying it thinks around 9,600 people are contracting the virus every day, a 60% rise from the 6,000 a week prior. Both surveillance projects are picking up far more than the government's official testing program, which recorded 6,000 plus cases on Thursday and Wednesday. KCL collects its data by sending tests to people who report telltale symptoms of COVID-19 into the mobile app, while the ON study sends tests to random households regardless of their health status. Data from the symptom tracking app, which has seen millions of Brits sign up and report their symptoms, suggests there are nearly 150,000 people currently suffering symptomatic COVID-19, although many more will have no symptoms. This figure has more than doubled since last week, when there were about 70,000 symptomatic patients. The chief scientist behind the app said it was fresh evidence the crisis was rising at an alarming rate. On Monday, Sir Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty made a stark forecast of 50,000 coronavirus infections per day by mid-October, which could lead to some 200 deaths a day by November. But it has since been revealed this scenario, claimed not to be a prediction, was based on studies involving just hundreds of positive cases. A spokesman for Sir Vallance confirmed on Tuesday that the 7-day estimate was heavily based on findings of the weekly survey of the Office for National Statistics and the React-1 survey by Imperial College London. The studies test a random sample of 100,000 people, but as the virus is circulating at low levels, they have to base their predictions off only a few hundred positive cases. In the last React-1 study on September 7, they spotted 136 coronavirus cases out of 153,000 people sampled. The low number led them to predict that infections could double every 7 days. This doubling every 7 days was used by the government's top scientists to reach a scenario in which 50,000 cases a day were being diagnosed in October. The government admitted it used these surveys as opposed to actual testing data because it was worried that the figures lagged behind the spread of the disease. Even the Prime Minister appeared to undermine the pair on Tuesday when he admitted cases in the UK could be taking as long as 20 days to double in number. The same day the terrifying predictions were lambasted as implausible by scientists, Mr. Johnson stood in front of the House of Commons to unveil a wave of new measures designed to stop the spread of the disease, including making the army available to help police enforce stringent new coronavirus rules such as a 10 p.m. curfew on pubs and restaurants. Figures based on diagnosed cases alone suggest the outbreak is doubling every 14 days, rising from an average of 2,527 infections a day on September 10 to 4,964 yesterday. Meanwhile, the growth rate suggests cases are doubling between every 10 to 20 days. The size of the growth rate indicates the speed of change. Yesterday, the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, SAGE, reported the growth rate was growing by between 4 and 8% each day, up from the 2 to 7% they reported last week. The range they gave on September 11, 2 weeks ago, was from -1 to 3%, meaning there was some possibility that the number of new cases might still be falling slowly. Professor Kevin McConway, a statistician at the Open University, said, a 4% daily growth rate corresponds to a 32% weekly growth rate. And it corresponds to a time of about 18 days for the number of infections to double. An 8% daily growth rate corresponds to a weekly growth rate of about 71%, and a doubling time of about 9 days, just a bit over a week. So, in very broad terms, these growth rates do match the conclusions on the growth of new cases in yesterday's update on the ONS infection survey. And they are certainly big enough to be worrying. Scientists say the more testing, the more cases are found in the community and reported by the government. This can give the impression there are more infections in the population when there are not. Testing has been ramped up over the summer, doubling from a daily average of 112,000 on July 16 to 227,000 a day now. During this period, government-reported cases have increased eightfold. A useful measurement of whether cases are on the up due to testing or a genuine increase in spread is the test positivity rate, the number of people who test positive out of the total numbers swabbed. Department of Health data shows 19.83 of every 1,000 people are testing positive for the virus under the current testing scheme, up from 5 in July and 13 2 weeks ago. It's been rising steadily over July, August and September as a number of coronavirus restrictions were eased and people were encouraged to go back to work, eat out to help out, and children went back to school.
Now listen to the first interview with Kate and complete the notes by filling in the numbered spaces 1 to 5.
Hi there, Kate. Come on in. How are you today? Fine, thanks. Hi, Lukey. How's things?
Okay.
Well, as I explained on the phone, I'm a counsellor here at the Student Services section of the university. And I'm interviewing overseas students to help me draw up a guide for new students. So I'd be grateful if you could tell me a little about your time since you've been here in Cambridge.
Right. Idea.
Now, Kate, let's start with you. Okay. This is your second semester, isn't it? Could you tell us something about your first impressions of the town when you arrived?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was struck by how quiet it is here in the evening.
Yeah, I suppose Cambridge is a quiet place. Where did you live when you first arrived?
Well, I went straight into student accommodation. It was a kind of student hostel.
Ah, right. So, you didn't have to worry about doing your own cooking or anything like that?
No, but sometimes I wished I had. The food at the hostel was awful.
Oh, dear. But how were the other students?
To be honest, I haven't managed to make many friends, even though the place is full. People seem to keep to themselves. They're not really very friendly.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, what about the actual course? You're studying,
I'm doing a master's by coursework in environmental studies.
Oh, right. And how are you finding that?
Yeah, well, it's been pretty good, really. I've enjoyed the course, but I feel there hasn't been enough contact with the lecturers.
Oh.
They all seem to be incredibly busy. The only chance I've really had to talk to them was on the field trip.
Well, that's no good. Could anything be done to improve the course, in your opinion?
Well, I think it would be helpful to have meetings with lecturers on the course. Say, once a fortnight, something like that.
Regular meetings? Yes, that could certainly help. Now, Kate, we'll come back to you in a minute, but I'd just like to ask Lucy some questions.
Before they continue the interview, look at questions 6 to 10. As you listen to the rest of the interview, complete the notes.
Lucy, where are you from?
I am from Indonesia.
And how did you find Cambridge when you first arrived?
Well, I like it here. I think the city is very beautiful.
What about your accommodation? Was that okay?
Yes, okay. At first, I stayed with a family for 3 months. They were very kind to me, but they had 3 young children, and I found it difficult to study.
Right, I see.
So after 3 months, I moved out, and now I live with 2 other students in a student house. It's much cheaper, and we like it there.
Good. And, what about your studies? What are you studying?
I'm doing a Bachelor of Computing.
Computing, I see. Apart from the language difficulties, if you can separate them, how have you found the...
Okay, but...
Yes, go on.
Well, The main difficulty for me is getting time on the computers in the computer room. It's always busy, and this makes it very hard to do my practical work.
Yes, I'm sure it would. Can you reserve time in the computer room?
No, you can't. But it would certainly help if we could reserve computer time.
Yes. I'll look into that and see if something can't be done to improve things over there. Now, let's go back to Kate.
Last week, the Chinese embassy in India issued an advisory to the Indian media asking it to follow the government of India's position on the Taiwan question and not violate the One China policy. The advisory came in the run-up to Taiwan's National Day on Saturday. This legitimately sparked outrage among Indian journalists. It also prompted the Ministry of External Affairs to say that the Indian media is free and reports on issues as it sees fit. This was then followed with the appearance of posters greeting Taiwan in Delhi's key diplomatic enclave put up by a local Delhi leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP. With the embassy complaining, they were taken down, but only because they weren't authorized. The episode reflects the undemocratic orientation of the Chinese embassy, much in line with the nature of the one-party regime in China. India is a proud democracy. It has a free and vibrant media. There is a healthy foreign policy debate conducted out in the open. Beijing's actions in recent years and its military aggression in Ladakh have antagonized the Indian street. There is today a strong view that India must speak up against Chinese efforts to institute its hegemony. The media will, as it must, give space to these views. The government will, as it must, respect diplomatic norms. In fact, many would suggest that it has too cautious in its approach to Chinese sensitivities. But the media is within its right to flag issues and expand the foreign policy discourse. China should not think it can do in India what it does in its own country and suppress the media. If it wants goodwill among Indians, it should instead reform its behavior.
White House Coronavirus Response Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx is warning that the Northeast is experiencing troubling signs of a very different style of coronavirus spread as temperatures drop in the region. Birx said Thursday that fall's cooler weather in the region has led to coronavirus spreading faster within small gatherings of families and social groups than in schools and workplaces where people are following precautions. What we're seeing in the community is much more spread occurring in households and in social occasions, small gatherings where people have come inside, taken off their mask to eat or drink or socialize with one another, Birx said Thursday at a roundtable discussion at the University of Connecticut in Hartford, Connecticut. It's a similar type of spread pattern that was seen in southern states over the summer when people flocked to air-conditioned indoor areas to escape heat and humidity, she said, according to ABC News. She added that she has seen people rationalizing that it's okay to remove their face masks or not follow social distancing rules because the people they're with appear healthy, but pointed out that people can be infected and asymptomatic. Birx noted that the new increase in coronavirus cases in Connecticut is really a message to the state that the kind of spread that we're seeing now is very different from the spread we experienced in March and April. She added that what we did in the spring is not going to work in the fall. Beginning in March, many northeastern states were quick to order residents to shelter at home and shut down non-essential businesses as a way of trying to curb the spread of coronavirus when death tolls and infection rates were skyrocketing. It wasn't until May that many of the same states began slowly reopening in stages while also mandating the wearing of face masks, social distancing, and other precautionary measures meant to help prevent the virus spread.
The UK was one of 39 countries at the United Nations to raise concerns over a security crackdown in Hong Kong and the abuse of the Islamic population in the Xinjiang. Earlier this year, China's ambassador to the UK, Liu Zhiming, was forced to deny reports that the country was attempting to reduce the Uyghur population through forced sterilization, insisting it was not government policy. Experts estimate that more than 1 million Uyghurs and other minorities have been rounded up into a network of internment camps in total. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab told MPs at Westminster today that evidence of abuses in Xinjiang was being reviewed to see whether it amounted to genocide. He told the Foreign Affairs Committee, "I have made clear that there is evidence of serious and egregious human rights violations, gross human rights violations. But to be classed as genocide," Mr. Raab, a former war crimes lawyer, said it had to be proved that the deliberate intention was the destruction of a minority group. Certainly, I think the more that we see of that evidence, and I think the more the international community addresses its mind to it, the more I think we do need to look very carefully at what action we take, Mr. Raab said. I think the concerns of what's happening to the Uyghurs, the detention, the mistreatment, the forced sterilization, is something that we can't just turn away from. Asked by Tory MP Alicia Kearns whether a boycott of the 2022 Games would send a strong signal to the Beijing government, Mr. Raab said, "Generally speaking, my instinct is to separate sport from diplomacy and politics. But there comes a point where that may not be possible. I would say let's gather the evidence, let's work with our international partners, let's consider in the round what further action we need to take." Committee Chairman Tom Trugendit asked whether the government would be encouraging the Duke of Cambridge to attend the 2022 Games. Boris Johnson's chilling warnings about the possibility of a fresh national lockdown were cast into doubt today as new figures showed the infection rate already appears to be slowing. In the strongest evidence yet that the rule of 6 and local lockdowns are working, results from the largest COVID-19 study in England found the R rate fell from 1.7 to around 1.1 last month. But the director of the study, by Imperial College London and Ipsos Mori, said the interim findings from 80,000 participants reinforced the need for protective measures to help extinguish the virus. That the current restrictions seem to be stemming the spread will fuel the case of cabinet hawks who are urging against a rush to an even tougher lockdown, which would inflict further devastation on the economy. The findings contrast with the grim message from Mr. Johnson, Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance at a Downing Street press conference last night that the outbreak is going in the wrong direction. The PM dismissed pressure from many Tories to change strategy and focus on protecting jobs, saying he would not throw in the sponge. Critics have argued that the recent suite of measures, including local lockdowns and national restrictions such as 10 p.m. curfews on pubs, are ineffective but are laying waste to businesses and infringing civil liberties. There has been increasing anxiety, including in cabinet, about following the ultra-cautious approach from Professor Whitty and Sir Patrick. One senior minister told Mail Online that the government was now talking more widely to people with different views. While the rate of infection appears to be falling, the study, commissioned by the Department of Health, found that of the volunteers tested between September 18th to 26th, 1 in 200 people had coronavirus. It also revealed the virus to be spreading more among young people while simultaneously laying bare the north-south divide, pointing to the northwest as the epicenter of the UK's outbreak. Health Secretary Matt Hancock announced a new lockdown for Merseyside this morning, with households banned from mixing indoors as has happened in the northeast. But he told the Commons, "The study published today shows us hope that we can crack this." Professor Paul Elliott, director of the program at Imperial from the School of Public Health, said while our latest findings show some early evidence that the growth of new cases may have slowed, suggesting efforts to control the infection are working, the prevalence of infection is the highest that we have recorded to date. This reinforces the need for protective measures to limit the spread of the disease and the public's adherence to these, which will be vital to minimize further significant illness and loss of life from COVID-19. Harry and Meghan Markle's African trip cost £245,000, making it the most expensive jaunt by the firm last year, as total travel bill hits £5.3 million. Just over 2 weeks ago, Prince Harry and Meghan announced that they have paid back public money spent renovating their UK home Frogmore Cottage. And now it has emerged that the lump sum also covers commercial rent that they must now pay on the Windsor property as their private home. A senior palace source said yesterday that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have made a substantial contribution to the sovereign grant that covers refurbishment and rental obligations for Frogmore Cottage. The exact amount has not been disclosed and will not be disclosed until reporting at the end of this financial year. But the lump sum exceeds the £2.4 million cited so far as public expenditure on the cottage and means that their rental on the property is covered for an unspecified period of time. Sources defended the cost, saying it was a key visit approved by the Foreign Office and helped highlight the work of numerous charities. Harry and Meghan's last official tour as members of the royal family cost British taxpayers almost £250,000, official accounts revealed today. The high-profile trip to South Africa, Botswana, Angola and Malawi last autumn had been billed as one of the showpiece events of the royal year. But the couple left months of work by staff and diplomats in tatters after they launched a stinging rebuke against the media during the publicly funded trip, as well as secretly recording an explosive TV documentary in which Meghan painted Harry's family as uncaring by accusing them of failing to ever ask if she was okay. The Sussexes, who also took baby son Archie on the trip, stepped down as senior working royals months later and now live in the US, where they are financially independent, having signed a multi-million-pound deal with Netflix. Royal accounts published today show £245,643 was spent on scheduled flights and a private jet for the couple and their entourage, making it the most expensive royal trip of the year. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex undertook over 20 engagements, bringing attention to a number of worthwhile causes, in particular, raising awareness of the work and the legacy of the Halo Trust, an anti-landmine charity championed by Princess Diana, the source said. The visit, as an official visit funded by the government, fulfilled the objectives that were set out for it. A further £210,345 was spent by royal officials on a private charter plane to take Prince Charles to Oman to pay official respects after the death of the king. The trip lasted just 2 days. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's tour to Pakistan last year was the third most expensive of the year, costing £117,116. but was considered a huge success by ministers. Questions have also been raised about the £15,848 spent to flying beleaguered Prince Andrew by private jet to the Royal Portrush Golf Club in Northern Ireland for a 2-day trip to the Open Championship last July. The club later dumped him as patron following his disastrous television interview in November. A palace source defended Andrew's use of a charter instead of a scheduled flight, saying, "In this particular case we concluded that, actually, the use of charter was the only way to get him to complete his engagements to fit in with his other programs." Even diligent Princess Anne found herself under the spotlight for spending £16,440 on another private jet to take her from London to Rome and back to watch her beloved Scotland play in the Six Nations Rugby International against Italy. She is patron of Scottish Rugby Union. The total bill for royal travel in 2019/2020 was £5.3 million. A 15.2% increase on last year's £4.6 million, according to the palace's annual report and accounts, published today. Anti-monarchist campaign group Republic said the figures failed to reflect the true annual cost of the monarchy, which it puts at £345 million by taking account of lost revenues from the royal estates, policing and the cost to other authorities such as local councils. Spokesman Graham Smith said, "These figures don't disclose the daily abuse of money on shorter trips around the country, taking helicopters when they could go by car, driving when they could go by train." A 15% increase in travel costs when hospitals can't deliver the very best care to every person in need, when teachers are struggling to pay for the necessary books and equipment and the police are stretched to breaking point, is scandalous. Why is the government paying for Prince Andrew to go to golfing tournaments, or Princess Anne to attend a rugby match in Italy? This is an abuse of public money far worse than the MPS expenses scandal, and it has to stop. Buckingham Palace also confirmed yesterday that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have paid an undisclosed sum upfront for the rental and refurbishment of Frogmore Cottage. Critics had called for Harry and Meghan to pay back the £2.4 million of taxpayers' money spent renovating their Windsor property, which they have decided to keep on as a permanent base in the UK despite buying an £11 million mansion in California. The accounts also revealed that the pot from which Prince Charles draws money for the Cambridges and Sussexes swelled to £5.6 million. Up £556,000 on last year.
As you listen to the second part of the lecture, complete the notes and diagram in the spaces provided.
If you have a well-balanced diet, then you should be getting all the vitamins that you need for normal daily living. However, sometimes we think we're eating the right foods, but the vitamins are escaping. Perhaps as a result of cooking, and anyway, we're not getting the full benefit of them. Now, if you lack vitamins in any way, the solution isn't to rush off and take vitamin pills, though they can sometimes help. No, it's far better to look at your diet and how you prepare your food. So, what are vitamins? Well, the dictionary tells us they are food factors essential in small quantities to maintain life. Now, there are fat-soluble vitamins which can be stored for quite some time by the body, and there are water-soluble vitamins which are removed more rapidly from the body. And so a regular daily intake of these ones is... Okay, so how can you ensure that your diet contains enough of the vitamins you need?
Well, first of all, you may have to establish some new eating habits. No more chips at the uni canteen, I'm afraid. Now, firstly, you must eat a variety of foods. Then you need to ensure that you eat at least 4 servings of fruit and vegetables daily. Now, you'll need to shop 2 or 3 times a week to make sure that they're fresh, and store your vegetables in the fridge or in a cool, dark place. Now, let's just refresh our memories by looking at the healthy diet pyramid. Okay, can you all see that? Good. Well, now, as you see, we've got 3 levels to our pyramid. At the top, in the smallest area, are the things which we should really be trying to avoid as much as possible. Things like, yes, sugar, salt, butter, all that sort of thing. Next, on the middle of our pyramid, we find the things that we can eat in moderation. Not too much, though. And that's where we find milk, lean meat, fish, nuts, eggs. And then at the bottom of the pyramid are the things that you can eat lots of, because they're the things that are really good for you. Here we have bread, vegetables, and fruit. So, don't lose sight of your healthy diet pyramid when you do your shopping.
As you listen to the second part of the lecture, complete the notes and diagram in the spaces provided.
If you have a well-balanced diet, then you should be getting all the vitamins that you need for normal daily living. However, sometimes we think we're eating the right foods, but the vitamins are escaping. Perhaps as a result of cooking, and anyway, we're not getting the full benefit of them. Now, if you lack vitamins in any way, the solution isn't to rush off and take vitamin pills, though they can sometimes help. No, it's far better to look at your diet and how you prepare your food. So, what are vitamins? Well, the dictionary tells us they are food factors essential in small quantities to maintain life. Now, there are fat-soluble vitamins, which can be stored for quite some time by the body, and there are water-soluble vitamins, which are removed more rapidly from the body. And so a regular daily intake of these ones is... Okay, so how can you ensure that your diet contains enough of the vitamins you need? Well, first of all, you may have to establish some new eating habits. No more chips at the uni canteen, I'm afraid. Now, firstly, you must eat a variety of foods. Then you need to ensure that you eat at least 4 servings of fruit and vegetables daily. Now, you'll need to shop 2 or 3 times a week to make sure that they're fresh, and store your vegetables in the fridge or in a cool, dark place. Now, let's just refresh our memories by looking at the healthy diet pyramid. Okay, can you all see that? Good. Well, now, as you see, we've got 3 levels to our pyramid. At the top, in the smallest area, are the things which we should really be trying to avoid as much as possible. Things like, yes, sugar, salt, butter, all that sort of thing. Next, on the middle of our pyramid, we find the things that we can eat in moderation. Not too much, though. And that's where we find milk, lean meat, fish, nuts, eggs. And then at the bottom of the pyramid are the things that you can eat lots of, because they're the things that are really good for you. Here we have bread, vegetables, and fruit. So, don't lose sight of your healthy diet pyramid when you do your shopping.
The southwest and central plains of the United States in the second half of the 21st century could be drier and longer than anything humans have seen in those regions in the last 1,000 years. According to a new NASA study published in Science Advances on February 12, 2015. The research found continued increases in human-produced greenhouse gas emissions drives up the risk of severe droughts in these regions. Ben Cook said natural droughts like the 1930s Dust Bowl and the current drought in the southwest have historically lasted maybe a decade or a little less. Climate scientist at NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies and the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory at Columbia University in New York City, and lead author of the study. What these results are saying is we're going to get a drought similar to those events, but it is probably going to last at least the likelihood of a mega drought, a drought lasting more than 3 decades, is 12%. If greenhouse gas emissions stop increasing in the mid-21st century, as in a climate scenario called RCP 4.5, Cook and his colleagues project the likelihood of mega drought to reach more than 60%. However, if greenhouse gas emissions continue to increase along current trajectories throughout the 21st century, climate scenario RCP is an 80% likelihood of a decades-long megadrought in the southwest and central plains between the years 2050 and 2099. The scientists analyzed a drought severity index and 2 soil moisture data sets from 17 climate models that were run for both emission scenarios. The high emission scenario projects the equivalent of an atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration of 1,370 parts per million, ppm, by 2100, while the moderate emission scenario projects the equivalent of 650 ppm by 2100. Currently, the atmosphere contains 400 ppm of CO2.
Complete the application form in the space.
Good morning. Can I help you?
Yes, I was told to come over here to get. Is this the right place?
Yes, it is. Are you a postgraduate student?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, I'll just need to take some details. Your name?
Richard Lee. That's spelled L-E-E.
Richard Lee. And the address?
Flat 13, 30 Enmore Road.
How do you spell Enmore?
E-N-M-O-R-E. And that's in the suburb of Newport. N-E-W-P-O-R-T.
Faculty?
Beg your pardon?
Which faculty are you in?
Oh, architecture, the Faculty of Architecture.
And the registration number of your car?
Let me see. LXJ50. Oh no, sorry, I always get that wrong. It's LJX058K.
LJX508K?
No, 058K.
Ah. And what make is the car?
It's a Ford.
A Ford, fine. Well, I'll just get you to sign here, and when you've paid the cashier, I'll be able to issue you with the sticker.
Where do I pay?
Just across the corridor in the cashier's office. Oh, but it's 12:30 now, and they close at 12:15 for lunch. But they open again at 2:15 until 4:30.
Oh, they're not open till 2:15.
No. When you get your sticker, you must attach it to the front windscreen of your car. I'm afraid it's not valid if you don't have it stuck on the window.
Right, I see. Thanks very much. I'll just wait here now. Listen to the guide and complete the notes.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Maritime Museum. Now, before we commence our tour, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the history of the museum. As you can see, it's a very modern building, built in the postmodern style, and it was in fact opened by the Prime Minister of Australia in November 1991. It's been designed with a nautical flavour in mind, to remind us of our links with the sea. But the museum isn't only housed in this building. There are a number of historic ships docked outside in the harbour which form part of the museum, and which you are also free to visit. And we'll be coming to them shortly. I'd just like to point out one or two things of general interest while we're here. Handicapped toilets are located on this floor, and the doors are wheelchair. The cloakroom, where you can hang your coat or leave your bags, is just behind us here. The Education Centre is on the top floor, and there's a good little library in there which you might like to use. Follow the signs to the Education Centre. You'll see a lot of little green arrows on the wall. The green arrows will take you there. The information desk, marked with the small letter I on your plan, is located right here in the foyer. So if you get separated from your friends, I suggest you make your way back to the information desk, because we'll be returning to this spot at the end of the tour. All right? Now, if you look out this window, you should be able to see where the museum's ships are docked. If you want to go on a tour of the old ship, the Vampire, she's docked over there, and you should meet outside on the quay. However, a word of warning. I don't recommend it for the grandmas and grandpas, because there are lots of stairs to climb. Right now, let's move on. Oh, I almost forgot to give you the times for that tour. Now, tours of the Vampire run on the hour, every hour, all right? Let's take a walk around the museum now. The first room we're coming to is the theatre. This room is used to screen videos of special interest, and we also use it for lectures. There's a continuous video showing today about the voyages of Captain Cook, so come back here later on if you want to learn more about Captain Cook. Now, we're moving along the gallery known as the Leisure Gallery. This is one of our permanent exhibitions, and here we try to give you an idea of the many different ways in which Australians have enjoyed their time by the sea. Surfing, swimming, life-saving clubs, that's all very much a part of Australian culture. At the end of this section, we'll come to the picture gallery, where we've got a marvellous collection of paintings, all by Australian artists. I think you can buy reproductions of some of these paintings in the museum shop. Well worth a good look. Now, we're coming to the Members' Lounge. Now, as a member of the museum, you would be entitled to use the Members' Lounge for refreshments. Membership costs $50 a year or $70 for all the family. So it's quite good value, because entry to the museum is then free. And down at the far end of this floor, you'll find a section which we've called Passengers and the Sea. In this part of the museum, we've gathered together a wonderful collection of souvenirs from the old days when people travelled by ship. You'll find all sorts of things there. Old suitcases, ship crockery, first-class cabins decorated in the fashion of the day. Just imagine what it must have been like to travel first class. Now, I'm going to leave you to walk around the museum on your own for a while, and we'll be back again at the information desk in 3/4 of an hour's time. I hope you enjoy your time with us at the museum today. Thank you.
As the conversation continues, complete the notes in the spaces provided.
Anything else I can help you with while you're here?
Well, yes, actually. Do you know what the course requirements are? I mean, how much work is expected for this course?
Well, you have to complete a tutorial paper.
What does that involve?
Well, it's a piece of work on a given topic based on some set reading tests. You'll have to give a small talk to your tutorial group.
How long does that have to be?
Oh, about 25 minutes usually.
I have to talk for 25 minutes?
Yes, that's right. And then you have to write up your piece of work and give it to the lecturer to be marked.
Right. And is that all?
No. You also have to complete a 3,000-word essay on a topic.
Can I choose the topic?
Yes, usually you can.
Right. That shouldn't be too bad.
And in addition to that, there is an exam.